Good afternoon. We're here today to talk about dyadic power theory. So before we dive into the findings of the theory, let's talk for a minute about what is power and why should we want to study it. Well, power is the ability to influence another's behavior, even in the face of pushback or resistance. And it's getting the other partner in a dyadic partnership to do what they don't want to do. Now, all individuals in relationship have expectations for power and dominance, and each dyadic partner has his or her own perception of how much power he or she wields in the relationship. And it's the ways in which the power and dominance are communicated in a relationship that affect all relationships, and that includes marriage relationships and relationships with significant others, and friendships, business relationships, sibling relationships, and other family members. Now, dyadic power theory, which was developed by Nora Dunbar in 2004, is concerned with how the expectations and perceptions of power are expressed in a relationship. DPT then is concerned with the interaction in a dyadic partnership, and it's the interaction or the relationship that is central to the theory. Now, research has shown that the relationship between power and control is curvilinear, not linear as one might expect. You might expect that as power in a relationship goes up, so does the attempt at control. But in actuality, we see that control attempts are clustered at the point in the graph where the power in the relationship is nearly equal. And we believe this is because the individuals on the low power end, the powerless individuals, don't bother with control attempts because they don't have any hope they'll succeed. And individuals on the high end of the power spectrum already have all the control in the relationship, and so they don't bother with control attempts because there's no need for them to. But in reality, it's in the middle part of the relationship where the power is nearly equal that we see more control attempts, because the nearly equal partners are vying back and forth for control. Situation to situation, that power kind of flows between the two in that nearly equal relationship. This curvilinear relationship also holds true for power and relational satisfaction. Again, it's at the midpoint, the point of nearly equal power, that we see greater relational satisfaction. And this would seem to indicate then that that state of nearly equal is the ideal state for a dyadic partnership. Now, what else have we learned from DPT research? Well, where do the perceptions of power in a relationship come from? They come from one's perceptions of one's own legal authority. And legal authority in a relationship is the ability to make decisions in a relationship and the right to use the resources of the relationship. And so when a partner can do that in a dyadic partnership, they perceive themselves to have power in the relationship. Now, the research has also shown that dominance is behavioral and relational. And what that means is that if you have a dominant partner, you're going to also have a submissive partner. If you have that partner on one end who holds all the power and is exerting control, you can be sure that the other partner in the dyadic relationship is going to be submissive and acquiescing to that control. Now, DPT research has also shown evidence of what's called a chilling effect. And that is what happens when the low power partner, the powerless partner in a relationship, will tend to avoid conflict. And so that's an important consideration when we do look at relationships with an unequal balance of power. Now, the findings of DPT research seem to hold true for all dyadic relationships. That includes intimate relationships, social relationships, even between strangers, and again, also those business partnerships. But it's important to note that we can also apply the findings to dysfunctional relationships, relationships that are characterized by bullying and by intimate partner abuse. Now, one context that DPT has not been used to investigate is power as it's expressed in faith communities. Now, power is a factor in much of the language and in many of the structures of the church. And throughout the ages, the church has been influenced by the society it's part of. And so it has allowed into it certain elements of patriarchalism, which is the language of domination, and also of androcentrism, which is the language of male superiority. But in actuality, when we look at the Gospels, we see that Jesus practiced a radical egalitarianism. For his time, it was just totally radical, and he treated all individuals, women, but indeed everyone, with equal dignity and respect. Now, it's relevant to look at DPT within the church because the prevailing teaching of the church regarding marriage does talk about headship, authority, and submission, and those are terms with connotations of power. And so it is relevant to look into that. And it also is true that rates of intimate partner violence are sadly as high in the church as they are outside of the church. And so this is a context that DPT bears looking into. Now, there are many other contexts that DPT could be used to investigate. It should be applied specifically to dyadic partnerships in business. It is true that much research has already taken place in the business realm, and the findings of that research very much support dyadic power theory, but it is time for the theory to be applied specifically to business. And dyadic power theory should be applied to the field of education. It would be beneficial to examine more closely that bully-victim relationship, and it would also be beneficial to examine teacher-student relationships and see how perceptions of power play out in those relationships. It would be beneficial to think about where the perceptions of power in relation come from. What are those messages that are being received that are forming those perceptions? And if we were to improve those messages, would the quality of and the satisfaction in dyadic partnerships increase? And again, it would be beneficial to look at power in the church and just to evaluate the message that the church is giving on power and dominance and make sure that they are staying in line with the Gospels and not taking on any influence from society. Dyadic power theory has already yielded a wealth of insight into the role of power and dominance in interactions in dyadic partnerships. But it can be hoped that future research will move the theory from a role that has largely been describing and examining and move it into a more proactive role in which it helps to develop a framework of healthy power interactions within dyadic partnerships. Thank you for your time today.